So what we're going to do is obviously start off with the first unit today, which is IT and Society. Right? So you have access to your course? You're able to access your course?
Yes.
Okay, good stuff. Now, basically, what I've done is there are 10 units in this particular, in this qualification, which is level 4 diploma in computing. So we're going to start off with one of the easy units to begin with, which is IT and Society. And in this particular unit, what we are looking at doing is trying to understand, the impact of IT, information technology in general. What impact has it had over the years, with regards to our lifestyle and obviously our usage of technology and consumption of information. Is that okay? Now, there are 2 or 3 documents that we will refer to when we do the unit in terms of coverage of the content. One of the things that I've opened up on the left-hand side to your right, you will see something called unit specification sheet. Now, this specification sheet, So this specification sheet is something that we are going to follow. We do the sessions. So today I'm going to start off with this particular unit, but we are going to only cover learning outcome 1, which talks about how IT has changed the way people live and work. This one in particular, okay? So after this, when we do separate sessions, I'm going to, obviously look at learning outcome 2 and learning outcome 3. And this is something that you'll also find on the Moodle, which I will just put it across if you give me 1 second. Because I think
I just checked the recent activity.
Yeah.
And I saw that the course has some updates.
Yes, I've uploaded some presentations specifically, for units like human-computer interaction and computer programming. So we are going to follow a pattern, and that's the reason I've done that. But just give me 1 second briefly. So let me just upload the. So that's the specification sheet that I've uploaded now for some of the units which I am going to be teaching. And obviously we have another tutor, Dr. Sumro, who's going to be doing some of the other units with you. So that you get to see, you will probably have access to it here. But we tend to normally, update the program as we are teaching and as we go along. Now, the other bit I'm going to do is, in terms of some additional reading, I'm going to kind of upload 2 books which are primarily meant for this unit, and that is something that you will have access to, to kind of understand the theories, the frameworks, and also develop a bit of more detail when we talk about, some concepts in this particular unit. Now, just to show you briefly 1 or 2 other things. So if you see the course layout, I'm just going to kind of, maximize the screen so you see 1 window. In terms of the course layout that you see, you will have the first file will be the unit specification file. Okay, that is this file that you will see in all the modules that we study, and this is how the Moodle is organized. The second file that you will see will be called SA. Now, SA is something called the sample assignment, which is provided by ATHE. And this is the one that you will need to attempt once we complete the unit. Okay, that is this Word file that you see on the screen.
Okay.
And then the third file that you get to see on Moodle will be something called ending with Word document again. It will be ending with SR, which is called suggested resources. And suggested resources, what we do is this is a suggested resources list with ATHE is provided. And what we normally do is we go out and buy at least 1 or 2 books which are made available to all the learners to be able to study and develop detailed concepts of this particular unit. So in this case, what I've done is there's a book called How Google Thinks, Works, and Shapes Our Life. And this is written by Stephen Levy. And that's the book that I've uploaded here you can access. So if you click on this PDF document, it'll open up the book. And it's quite an extensive book. It's for bedside reading because it's been written by Google. So what you can do is basically download this onto your phone, but there are some relevant chapters which I will suggest to you in the book that we will read. Not everything.
It's
Okay?
it's a data.
Yeah, it is quite big. Now, there is an extract of the book that we definitely want to read, which is about 15 pages. And one of the key topics that we will cover is what is big data. So that extract is what I would expect you to 100% go through, because this will help you in doing your assignment as well. And this is only 14 pages from the book. Okay? So this is 14 pages from the book that you need to study.
Okay, let me
Fine.
write it down. It's
And
from
yeah,
page.
it's an extract from the book, and this is something that I would suggest that you definitely study.
Oh, you uploaded it as well. Okay.
Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is, obviously there'll be some other parts of the documents which you'll get to see on Moodle, and they will be primarily PowerPoint presentations. So we are going to start off with the first one today, which is LO1, which stands for nothing but Learning Outcome 1. And that will tend to give you a bit of an overview of the unit, and also an overview of the, the task which will be covered in Learning Outcome 1.
Okay.
So let's start off with the present in terms of, Learning Outcome 1. Now, basically, the idea of studying this particular unit is, as you know, that over the last 50 years, let's put it this way, with the advent of computer, which happened in 1980s, early 1980s, technology has been moving on, and what has happened is our life, for good or bad, has actually changed because of the advent of computing. Now, because you're looking at doing this qualification, which is level 4 diploma in computing, it is imperative and very important for us to understand how computers have changed our life, both on the personal as well as on the work front. And what we need to be looking at in the first part of this unit is to understand how and what significant developments have actually happened in the last 50 years, which have changed the way we use machines, or the way we consume information, the way we create information, and the way we distribute information. Okay. Now, when you hear, just to look at a few examples here to explain this point, there is a difference between information, data, and knowledge. So when you look at, say, for example, if I place some articles in front of you, some magazine in front of you, what you will primarily see them is that, okay, they are some magazines which provide me some information, but essentially they are data, because they do not mean anything to you. So anything which is in terms of collective pieces of evidence or data, which is not having, say, a meaningful purpose, will be classified as something called data. The moment you assemble that data into some shape or form which is easily identifiable, and is it something that you can use in the future or in the present, that will become information. And at some stage, this information, when processed to look at maybe giving you some forecast, if, for example, when we look at a lot of weather patterns and, satellite imagery which comes in for our weather, and somebody then sits down to kind of predict how the weather would change in the next few days, whether we'll get snow, whether we'll have rainfall, that part of interpretation of information then becomes knowledge. Okay, so in the bit that we need to look at studying in this particular unit would be that there'll be a lot of repetitive use of the word data, which will also change into information. And at some stage, we will use information in synonymously with the word knowledge. So definitions of these three terms have to be, kept in mind, so that what is data? Data is raw information, which we can decipher, but it is not useful. Anything that you can decipher and make it useful becomes information, so it's no longer data. And then information which can be processed and used for future usage, or for making decisions, or, say, for example, making some forecast, then at that stage that will become knowledge. Okay. Now, what has happened over the years is, when we've looked at the advent of computing, this has led to creation of, initially in the early 80s, when you had PCs the size of personal computers, the size of rooms, a big room, and they used to be only, coded through they used to be only used within factories to basically code some information.
Yeah, I'm
But
sure
as
I
the
remember
size has
some.
become, yeah, as the size has become progressively small, they have become, you today have computers in the palm of your hand, and that is equivalent to a smartphone. So smartphone that you have, you can do email, you can chat, you can talk, you can see photographs, take photographs. All those things are now in the palm of your hand. So in the last, when we look at from early 80s, you look at 90s, 2000, and you look at the current time that we are in the last, I would say, easily 30 to 40 years, a lot has changed, and this change has been reflected in something called developments which have happened in specifically in the field of IT and technology. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at the changes which have happened, can you think of changes which have happened in the last, say, 20, 30 years when we look at technology in general?
In
Can
general.
you think of a few changes which have happened?
First of all, we realized some technologies regarding energy matters. Uh, the size of the brush now is smaller and at least 4 times the capacity they had.
Yes.
Graphic cards. I mean, I remember my first graphic card was 64 megabytes.
Megabytes. Now you can have graphic
And
cards which are gigabytes.
yeah, now it's 2 gigabytes. So
Correct. So
yeah.
if I look at not going into specifics, and if you look at this particular slide, which you can see on your screen, what we are looking at is if you look at banking as an example, the
Mhm.
banking sector, I think, if, I don't know myself, but probably if I look at my parents, the only way they could send and receive money or withdraw money was by going into the branch physically and getting hold of money. But in the
Mhm.
early 1990s, you had something which was the introduction of something called ATM, automated teller machines. So you could
Mhm.
actually have a bank card, and you could use that machine to withdraw some money. So one of the key change which happened, say, in the banking industry was we had physical banks which we had to go to get money, and people used checks at that point in time. But with the advent of ATM machines in the early 90s, that made banking possible in different locations.
Mhm.
Look at the car industry. So we are looking at bigger development. So if you look at the car industry, the first car was introduced by Ford in 1904, and that was obviously from that time we've come so much forward that today we have electric cars or cars which run on battery. But
Mhm.
if you see the advent of battery or battery related cars, they've become commercially available in the last 10 years only.
Yeah, I
We
know.
had solar powered cars, and experiments and developments were happening. A lot of companies were developing models, but commercially available models were only available 10 years back. So when
Mhm.
Nissan, Toyota introduced Lexus, for example, and some of the other hybrid models, that meant that cars could actually run on battery. When you look at say look at the advent of eBay and Amazon, you know,
Yeah.
in the early 1990s, there was no internet. So when internet was
Mhm.
introduced by Tim Berners-Lee in 1995, he was a British scientist who introduced the internet. At that point in time, it was primarily used only to share information or files across the various places on the globe, on the
Mhm.
cloud.
Yeah.
But as gradually the technology start to build up and they were commercially available, it led to the advent of email. Hotmail was one of the first emails which came out. And then when
Mhm.
email came out, sharing of documents, pictures, files, all those things became quite easy. So then you look at the advent of nowadays, you store most of your data on the cloud. You do not store it on your PCs, but you have data on the cloud. So what is progressively happening every 10 years we see is that there is a drastic change in technology which is happening, which is making our lives both on the personal and work front easier.
Mhm.
If you look at in the 1990s when computers were introduced in the office, people used to have desktop computers. There was nothing like a laptop. and people never used to
Mm.
bring home work. So when the work finished in the office between 9 to 5, that means they were done and they couldn't carry anything back home. But with the advent of laptops in 1996, 97, which were commercially available, that means people could afford it and buy it. What tended to happen is that the work and personal life became interconnected. That means if I couldn't finish work, my boss could have said that, okay, can you take this home and finish it for tomorrow morning? So
Mhm.
you had
Yes.
laptop with you, which you could take work home on and then complete it and bring it back in the morning. So every 10 years, what we are seeing is as the technology has improved, and as the internet technologies have improved, what we are now seeing is that a lot of people for Christmas shopping, they're buying most of the things on Amazon and eBay. You hardly visit the shop. So what you do is you do a bit of comparison to see if there are cheaper prices available. But these things
Mhm.
were not
Yeah.
there 20 years back. So with the advent of internet, fiber optics, faster speeds available, what has happened is it has led to the creation of something called IT, or e-commerce as a market. And e-commerce as a market now is being used by companies like Amazon, companies like eBay, or any such company on the high street which now has a store online, and they can sell not
Mhm.
just product online but also in the shops.
Mhm.
If you look at cell phones as a technology, in the 1990s, you had phones which were quite big, the Siemens S4, the Motorola D628,
Yeah, I
but they were
remember
as big
ones
as the palm of your
from
hand,
my
very
show.
heavy, and they had limited connectivity. You had to pull out an aerial. But nowadays, when you look at the Apple iPhone, the Samsung Galaxy phone, these phones pretty much
Mm.
work like supercomputers. So the way the technology is changing is actually making the differentiation between our work and personal life, it is disappearing. And what we also get to see as an advantage of the advancements in technology is that it is making our life easier in terms of usage of accessibility to certain things. So this particular slide that you see on your screen is actually a snapshot of how things have changed because of technology. And as I mentioned to you, the word data and information. So as you can
Mhm.
see, in the early 70s and the 60s and the 90s, it was more about data. Companies were building databases, companies were building,
Yeah.
storage spaces, which were essentially storing data on the servers. But nowadays, this data can be used by companies to create and share information, and it is now being shared and stored on the cloud.
Mhm.
So companies which were producing devices or hardware which could store information in some shape or form, but raw information was primarily looking at data. But now this data is being processed and is being shared actively between companies, and this is being used to kind of provide information and in some cases knowledge to companies to be able to target products for sales and marketing.
Mm.
And a
Yeah.
simple example of this would be if you're browsing the internet and if you're looking at, say, you're shopping for buying a perfume. And what tends to
Mhm.
happen is you will see that if you're on Google browser, Google Chrome, you will see that if you shop for perfume on the right hand side, it starts to give you more AdWords or more clues to look at where to shop
Yeah.
for perfumes.
Mhm.
So what is happening is Google in the background is processing the search data that you're trying to search for. So, for example, you're searching for you want to buy a perfume for, say, for example, YSL
Mhm.
or say Gucci or whatever. So you're trying to search, but in the background, the search is using that data to
Yeah.
kind of turn it into information, and that information is used by Google to push it out to companies, and these companies are then pushing AdWords that you can see on your browser.
Mhm.
So how easily with the usage of it has become so easy that with the use of technology, companies are able to not just look at your information, but process that information into meaningful data. And once that is
Mm.
meaningful, it is able to then push you AdWords for the particular product that you're buying online. So
And cookies for that.
yeah, yeah, correct. So the speed at which things have changed in the last 50 years has not just benefited customers, but also benefited businesses. And in general, it has made us more productive and it has made us more efficient in terms of doing our jobs. So let's look at a few slides of what I've explained. So key innovations like the advent of ATM, which appeared in 1960s. That means banking could become local, and these banking machines or ATM, automated teller machines, then allowed banks to expand. And because the money was then available in the remotest possible locations, it led to increase in demand of, say, products and services, and as a result has brought across prosperity. So people did not have to go into the branch or travel 50 kilometers to go into a bank branch to get money, but they could withdraw and deposit money locally. When we looked at the example of cars, although cars have been around for more than 100 years now, but we do get to see that electric cars have only been introduced recently in the last 10 years. So the first electric car was produced by Tesla in 2008. But the company was founded in 2003. So we can literally say we are not in 2018, but we can literally say that the electric cars have become a reality and are commercially available only in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Correct? And
Sure.
when we look at some of the other developments, we look at, say, the advent of barcodes. Because when we look at e-commerce, when we look at Amazon shipping a lot of products, or retailers buying a lot of products and selling it, and distributors selling it, there is something called, there's an invention which was introduced, which is called the barcode. And with the barcode, it allowed inventory and stock management to be made so much simpler. Because if you understand a distribution warehouse, have you been to IKEA?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to IKEA, you can pretty much buy anything under the sun in terms of furniture. Now look at how they assemble. They make furniture which is pretty much assemble. You can get that. You can buy that thing from IKEA. You can look at a manual and you can assemble any form of furniture that you buy at IKEA. That is only made possible because each of the parts or each of the components which actually make up a particular product have barcoding on it, and that's how they are produced. So when you look at their warehouse, they store so much different type of materials, but they're able to retrieve them quite easily. They're able to kind of restock them and also look at the inventory.
It's like they automated the process. Yeah.
So this is again one of the advantages that you will see, which has happened in the last in the last 50 years. Because of the advent of barcode, the technology has made stock keeping and inventory easier. Similarly, we talked about cell phones. When the first one was introduced by Dynatech, the company which introduced the cell phone way back in 1980s, along with Motorola. This particular hand phone was about 2 pounds in weight and costed about $4,000. But now you can see even the best of the best phones are available under $1,000, and they do much more than what the previous phones did. They had only black and white screens, very small screens, but this has then allowed and converted the world into something called a global village. So what we are looking at is invention and what is the advantage which that invention has created. Previous to this, if you recall, we used to use something called standard trunk dialing. If you had to dial international, you had to book a call some 20-30 years back. But with the advent of the phone, you can pick up the phone, dial any code, and you can speak to anyone in the world, anywhere, at any given point in time. So technology has made that possible.
Yeah, I didn't know that about booking.
Yeah, I think about if I put it this way, that when you had no cell phones and you had only landlines or desk-based phones, if you had to call somebody abroad or in another country, you had to basically book the call with the operator.
I used to call from my landline though to the US because I have family there, and actually, I didn't know anyway about that.
Yeah, so some of the, I think you'll be able to correlate to this. So when you go to a public booth to make a phone call, in those cases, when you pick up the phone, the handset, the operator says, yes, who do you want to speak to? So you give a number, and what they do is, a couple of years back, they used to basically say, okay, the calling party pays. When you said that this is the number I need to speak to, they used to connect on the other side and say, okay, do you want to speak to the person? You will be picking up the bill. They
Yeah,
said
like you
yes.
accept the charges. Yeah.
So look at that, and you look at 20 years down the line with the cell phone coming in, you can pretty much dial anywhere in the world as long as you have the dialing facility. One of the other key big achievements which have happened is because of the satellite global positioning system. You have had now satellite navigation, which is now pretty much integrated in all the cars. But if you look at
Mhm.
5, 6 years back, when the iPhone came out, they did not have maps on it. But in the last 5 years, smartphones have literally wiped out the handheld GPS devices like TomTom.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody. I think I remember 10 years back, I used to have a TomTom. Everywhere you were going, you used to put the postcode in, and you're going and following the TomTom as a navigation.
Mm.
But now,
Yeah.
because you have it in your phones, nobody uses the portable TomTom, and that company is pretty much gone out of business. So
Mhm.
all the satellite navigation companies, which were portable sat nav companies like Navman, Navstar, TomTom, they've all almost got into the business because technology has changed and the global positioning system is now integrated in your phone. So if you want to go anywhere, you can just type in the maps, the postcode, and it'll take you there. So these are advances which are happening in technology, which are transforming our lives, and this is making, to a certain extent, life very, very it is making things easier for us in our lives. Let's put it this way.
Mhm.
So this particular slide, which I have on the screen right now, also talks about, because technology is kind of almost changing every 10 years, it is also creating a disruption in our lives.
Yeah.
Have you heard about Moore's law?
Moore's law.
Yeah.
Um, I I heard it somewhere, but I can't I can relate. I've heard the name again, but
So
not
basically,
sure.
if you are into computing, Intel, which produces microprocessors for PCs, laptops, and
Mhm. Yeah.
MacBooks. What, so basically, Moore's law was, he's a scientist who created and worked on transistors, which store information on the processor.
Mhm.
Now, because he obviously predicted and came up with this idea, that's why it's named after him as the Moore's Law. Moore's Law basically talked about that every 10 years, or every certain number of years, he said that we could double the number of transistors on a microprocessor, which would drastically improve the performance of the PC. And because
Mhm.
this is doubling every 2 years, we are getting faster and faster processors which are more energy efficient and which are allowing us to process, compute, and kind of distribute information in a much, much more easier fashion. And after him, Gordon Moore, who was the scientist who basically invented or created this, after him, it is now called the Moore's Law. So basically, it talks about that because the pace at which technology is kind of bringing new things across, it is also creating a disruption in our lives. And this particular slide, which I have put on the screen right now, which you get to see, is that
Mhm.
you know in the last 50 years, we have because of the usage of technology, the modern day lifestyle has totally changed. So what we do get to see is that um, if I look at kind of recapping the three biggest developments, is that because of the advent of telecommunication or global positioning system, the world has become a global village. That means you can speak to anyone in the world, anywhere in the world, at any given point in time
Yeah.
because of this technology. If you look at
Exactly.
if you
Next
look at
door.
50 years, yeah, that's correct. So if you look at 50 years back, um, commercial aviation was there, but only very few people could afford to fly. But now with the advent of budget airlines like EasyJet, Ryanair, and a whole host of other airlines across the world, traveling to a different destination is very, very affordable and within the reach of every common individual, every common man, or every individual on this earth. So the world has in general become a smaller place. Okay.
Okay.
Now let's look at other bits that we want to understand from a point of view of some of the key things related to this particular unit. Now, first things first that we look at, one of them is, when we look at a lot of information being created, a lot of information being distributed. So what has happened over the years is that there have been some cyber laws or laws which have been created by government to kind of process, distribute and control the flow of this information. So what we look at is we need to understand the concept of something called digital citizenship. Okay, because we consume information, we produce information, we distribute information, whether you are talking to your friends on WhatsApp or you're on Facebook, you are basically either consuming information or you are distributing information. And from that aspect, what we need to do is, because all of us have some profiles which are primarily online, we need to be able to understand the concept of something called digital citizenship. Now, this is defined as, certain norms which are appropriate and help you to show a responsible behavior towards the use of technology, right? So, for example, if you're using Facebook, Facebook has a code of conduct, and that code of conduct says that, okay, users over the age of 13 can open an account. If you open an account, you can do and share this information, do this and do that. So there are some do's and don'ts which Facebook as an organization gives you when you open an account on their, on their platform. And that do's and don'ts basically give you some guidelines to show and use the platform responsibly. Okay. So there are some meanings and aspects to why do they ask you to accept these terms and conditions when you open an account, right? So they ask you to say, if you open an account on Facebook, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you have to adhere to these guidelines. These are things which they are trying to explain to you because they expect you to be able to use those services responsibly. And this then becomes a part of some sort of an agreement when you kind of start to use Facebook as a platform for communication, for sharing information with friends and family. And this constitutes nothing but something called, something which falls under called digital citizenship. Now, what all does it include? It includes things like, you have access to it from your phone, your PC, your laptop, or a cyber cafe. So it does not restrict access, but it asks you that you can access the account from anywhere in the world as long as you have access to the internet. Now, Facebook also has, their marketplace. That means you can buy and sell products on Facebook. So it has certain guidelines for how you can sell and how, and what you have to look to or adhere to the law and legislation when you are buying goods or selling goods online using that platform. Now, the main reason why they look at or why you sign on to Facebook is because you're looking at communication with friends and family, sharing information. So obviously, digital communication falls into place when you look at one of the conditions of opening the account. And then we go on, and obviously at some stage they talk about your rights and responsibilities. They also talk about, how you need to secure your accountings like password. Never share, your password with strangers, and don't share, sensitive information online because it's all in the open domain. So when we start to use technology, what we are also looking at doing is we are also kind of signing on to something called a responsible behavior charter, which falls under something called digital citizenship. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that understood?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good stuff. Now let's look at some of the other things that we would like to look at. So let's look at the role of information. How does it relate to gender, age, and culture? Now there are certain because when we use internet, for example, what we do get to see is that there is no discrimination or no kind of a distinction made. Who's using the internet? What are you using?
Bias, yeah.
And things like that, right? So this particular medium of communication, or this piece of technology does not relate to or differentiate between people because of their age, gender, or culture in short. Okay. So basically, there is something called net neutrality This is a word that you will come across, which will talk about that, irrespective of caste, color, age, gender, geography that you come from, or what is your demographic, you are able to use that platform, access information, share information. This basically provides something called net neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what sometimes you'll get to see and hear in the news is that things which are put out on the website or information which is put out on news websites, they normally use the word that you have to be neutral, you have to be unbiased. That means you have to put
Mm-hmm.
across your views wherein you're not being
Objectively.
influenced by others. And that is where the term net neutrality comes across. That means you're putting the information across without any bias, without any
Mm-hmm.
pressure, and this is for consumption for each and any individual which comes to your site. Now, what do we see the reverse effect of this? As you see that we do talk about sometimes that we need to kind of have some controls so that youngsters have limited access to information at a certain age. Because we do get to see that sometimes people get addicted to a particular type of information on the internet. So we do get to see a lot of people, young people in general, who get fascinated by games, the gamers in particular, they spend a lot of hours on the internet. So one of the negative effects which internet has on people and families in general is that if the control is not established in terms of usage, you do get to see if young people get onto the internet, they get addicted with some of the things that they look at. For example, a lot of people that I know which are into gaming, they do 5, 6, 7 hours of gaming online. Right. So this
I
is
do.
something if they
I
do it
do that as well.
primarily. Yeah, I agree. So if they do it for those many number of hours, this is termed as something called addiction. That means it has a negative effect. And in order to look at
Mm-hmm.
some of these disorders which the technology is having, one of the other things that you will see is a lot of people who type quite a lot using the keyboard, they develop some sort of a syndrome on their fingers. Their fingers tend to ache quite a lot. So what has happened is
Mm-hmm.
if I look into the monitor quite a lot during the course of the day, 8 to 10 hours, then I can have a bit of an effect on my eyesight. So over the years, technology has made a lot of things simpler and easier, but there are some detrimental effects of technology which are also happening. And in order to study those negative effects which the technology has on human or people in general, there is a research institute which has also been created, and this is called the Addiction Research Foundation in Toronto, which is in Canada, and it studies specifically things related to internet addiction disorder, IAD. Okay, so there
Okay.
are some positive effects of the technology, and there are some negative effects. But because we are using technology more and more on a daily basis, there are institutes or there are bodies which have been set up to study the negative effects and the influence of technology on people in general for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a simple example of this would be that as parents, what we tend to do is if we have to, not have access to information for children at home, what we do is we typically, what is the software that we typically use to, restrict access to the internet? Can you recall something?
Oh,
Oh, on the router, we
you
put
asked
some
about
sort
this.
of a software.
Yeah, the password. Uh,
Correct. So very good. So very good. So the basic thing that we can do is we can restrict by putting something as basic as by making it password enabled, isn't it? So
mm-hmm.
what sometimes you will see on television, um, I don't know whether you recall, but with the advent of satellite television, which was maybe 20 years back when we had Sky and some of these
Yeah,
coming
early
in.
90s.
Yeah. So when we had some of the channels on which the content was for 18 years and over, parents used to have the ability to be able to install something called parental control. And that
Yeah, I
would
remember that.
restrict using a password the access to that information for people who are over 15, over 18, or things like that. So
Yeah.
when you get to see the effects of technology having the negative side, there are lots of things which are also being introduced, and these are being introduced to kind of, have a barrier between the access to that information at a certain age. And these are things which have come out over the years and called, which fall under the category of something called parental control. So when you look at
Mhm.
television at home, when you look at internet at home on routers, you have firewalls, you have passwords, and you have parental control applications which allow you to kind of restrict the access to that data or information. And these are being prescribed by the Internet Research Foundation, so that for individuals under the age of 13, they should not have access to this information. And this is something which is also coming about as an offshoot in the last 10 to 15 years. Now, what we look at is, in general, we are talking about certain points, in this case, in some of the slides that you see on the screen. And what we are trying to basically look at is how our lives on the personal and professional fronts are affected by some of the information that we consume. And in some cases, you look at a term which you will get to hear over and over again, and that will be called communication or information overload. Right? Sometimes, if you're working in your office, or say, for example, you work in an office, you get 200 emails on a day. So you sometimes say, I've got bombarded by emails today, I'm overloaded by emails
Mhm.
today. So
Yeah.
you get to see an effect of sometimes these things, that wherein we will use these terms which will mean that, okay, I'm getting unusually high number of emails today as against my normal frequency of 10 to 15 a day,
Mhm.
but today I'm ended up receiving about 200 emails. So in those cases, there could be a problem wherein somebody is sending you phishing emails. It could be because of a virus. It could be because of
Yeah.
emails coming to you because somebody's got your address, and bots are sending you emails
Mhm.
just to disrupt your work. So those are things that we do get to see, which tend to happen with technology, sometimes. And in order to control this, organizations then end up kind of installing firewalls and antivirus softwares and things like that, which protect
Yeah.
you from.
Anti-malware.
Yeah, that is correct. So which protect you from obviously getting these excess emails.
Mhm.
Now look at the other side of it, which is to talk about how this is changing the way we consume information. Now when we look at something called social networking, can you think of when was Facebook introduced?
Facebook. I
Yeah.
think it was around 2006, 7.
Yeah, so it's round about Mark Zuckerberg, when he was studying in Harvard in 2003, he came up with this idea of introducing something called an application for social networking. So it became commercially available in 2005-6. And as you can see, in the last 10 years, Facebook has over 1.7 billion users.
Mhm.
Right? So this concept of how IT has changed our life, we didn't know anything of social networking. Before that, if we had to go out and meet friends and family and relatives, we used to do the old traditional way of going out, meeting them, having dinners, things
Yeah.
like that. And then the concept of social networking came in. That means you could share anything with anybody online as long as they are connected with you as in your friend circle. So when you look at social networking, there are lots of things which have come in the last couple of years. So social networking, Facebook is obviously the biggest player, but there are lots of other types of application which allow you to kind of meet people, friends, family on
Mhm.
different
Yeah.
sites. And with this has grown the concept of emails, and that has also led
Mhm.
to something called phone calls or Skype calls. So you're able to not
Yeah.
just simultaneously communicate, send messages, but you're able to make video calls, and also in some cases able to share music, photos, video, everything.
Mhm. Yeah.
So this as a concept has revolutionized the way we actually look at now distributing information. Now, with the advent of social networking, what has also happened is there's something called learning which is coming. So e-learning as a concept involves, the advent of internet with a lot of technologies like Java and HTML now being available. This is a live example. You're studying with us through the internet or e-learning
Yeah,
route.
indeed.
You're based in Staffordshire, we are based in Manchester, but we are still able to talk to each other, see do the delivery of the program. You're able to see my screen, and that's all possible
Mm-hmm.
because of the internet and e-learning as a technology, as a concept. So IT has definitely changed the way education is also being delivered. So we have certain things which allow us to, use a webinar or a web meeting software. And with the use of that, we can actually communicate with pretty much anywhere in the world with any students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we talk about certain things like online shopping. I don't need to elaborate that. One of the other things that has also happened is job search. If you look at 10 years back, 15 years back, we used to go and meet job consultants or, agencies which
Mm.
used to provide jobs, but no longer these agencies or high street names are available or, are still they've become more or less online job portals. You're able to
Mm-hmm.
basically
Yeah.
search for a job, apply for a job. Pretty much everything happens online now. Now, the other things that you will look at is how you can get information round the clock, right? Yeah, I think you'll have to again put on your Think app and look at, if you look at the 1980s, I think most of the television networks used to only broadcast for about a couple of hours during the day. So if you looked
Mm-hmm.
at BBC in the early 80s, they used to broadcast only 3 or 4 hours a day. And there was only one channel which used to be 24 hours. But today,
Mm.
BBC has maybe a lot of channels which are broadcasting 24 hours a day, and then you have access to this news and information pretty much, anywhere in the world. And this is again made possible because technology has enabled it, telecommunication has also enabled it, and because of news now available 24/7, we are able to remain connected either through the mobile phone, tablet, PC, internet, or the television, and it allows us to get up-to-date information at any given minute or any given point in time. And this has been made possible through something called continuous connectivity. Because of the internet, you have access to this information pretty much at a touch of a button on any kind of screen. Okay? There's another thing that
Yeah.
you need to know about. There are 4 types of screen that we get information from. Can you think of what are these 4 types of screens?
Screens. Cell phone screens.
Yes.
The laptop or PC.
Yeah.
Television.
Yes.
And screen. Other screen. Um. Hmm. What's the other screen? Like tablets or?
Yep. So pretty much you're on
Or
the same right lines. If you look at, there are 4 types of screens. The number one screen that we were used to was the cinema screen. When you have to go out and
yeah.
see a movie,
I've heard
you
of that.
drive to you have a drive-through cinema, and you basically sit down and you see the movie on the cinema screen. The
Mm-hmm.
second screen which came out was television. So in our homes, we could then obviously consume information, see the news, see movies, and television was considered the second screen. Then in the early 1980s, you had television came out in the 70s. Before that, we had only cinemas or movie theaters. In the, I'm talking 1940s, 50s, so 60s was the 60s, 70s was the television. In the early 80s, you have computers. So computer
Mm-hmm.
became the third screen. So computer, PC, Mac became the third screen. And now we have the fourth screen, which is a smartphone or a smart device, which could
Or a
be a
smart.
tablet, a smartphone, and this is classified as something called the fourth screen. Now, the fourth screen has continuous connectivity. That means you can pretty much see news on your phone, you can receive emails on your phone, you can browse everything, share photos. It allows for
Mm-hmm.
pretty much every sort of information to be shared, including music, video, photos on your phone. So the fourth screen pretty much has continuous connectivity. Wouldn't you agree?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
good stuff. Okay, last bit that we were looking at is, so now you understand developments which have happened in the last 50 years, how technology has changed. We have briefly looked at how technology is helping us, how these developments in technology are helping us to consume, basically create data, consume information, and process it to share knowledge. So when you
Mhm.
see an example would be that BBC, for example, has over 4,000 reporters, across the world. Now, when a reporter covers the event, there is something which happens. For example, North Korea launches a missile, and the
Mhm.
reporter actually reaches a spot to capture that bit of news. So when when that bit of data is being captured, it is still a data because the reporter is only gathering the facts and the information about how to relay this to the
Mhm.
channel or the backend, network. Now, once
Yeah.
this news or the information actually comes into the channel, then an editor sits down and kind of, tailors it out into a news item. And once it is
Mhm.
broadcasted, it actually becomes a knowledgeable piece of information saying that they had launched they've
Yeah.
tested a
Refined.
missile. That missile went up to so many kilometers, can do so many things, and then, it
Mhm.
poses this threat. So that becomes information. So what you understood is the advancement which have happened, how data gets processed into information, information into knowledge, and how this is helpful for us in terms of our day-to-day work lives and also in our personal life. Now let's look at
Mhm.
understanding the third bit of the equation, which is how this technology has impacted our lives, and this impact we need to understand what kind of an impact it has had. So let's look at a few, slides to understand the impact of technology. Now, when you talk to your
Mhm.
friends face to face, it is important for you because you want to have a one-to-one interaction. But sometimes now you talk to your friends even through FaceTime or video call, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it
True.
still is able to give you the same interaction that you were having when you were in front of them face to face, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah.
So what I would give you an example is sometimes what happens is you're within the same city, you want to talk to your brother or your sister, rather than picking up the phone and making a phone call or maybe going to see them at their home, what you do is you do FaceTime or you do a video call through WhatsApp. And the reason why you do
Yeah.
it
It's
is
more
because
convenient
that,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. So on the internet. So that reason sometimes you do it is because it has the same impact of meeting them face to face at their house or they coming to your house, and you're able to gain that same impact of meeting them face to face using a video conference call, right? So
Mhm.
the use of this particular technology has had an impact on us is that it is making interactions quicker, possible and feasible through different ways. And the last but not the least, it allows sometimes to have this interaction in a much quicker and efficient manner as compared to you, kind of taking out your car, getting into the car, driving down to see your brother or your sister. If you wanted to
Mhm.
get in touch with them quickly, what you can do is send them a text and say, okay, I want to have a quick call with you, and you could catch up with them. And one of the impacts that has had is the technology has made this communication quite quicker and efficient.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the second thing
Yep.
that we look at is because we look at consumption of information through lots of mediums. Sometimes if I have had, say for example, if I've gone on a holiday and what I want to do is share all my pictures that I've had on and my experience that I've had on the holiday with a lot of people and friends and a lot of people within my friends and family. One of the clear things that I will end up doing would be that I would kind of post all those pictures or that album on Facebook.
Yeah.
And because
Twitter,
all of them are
Instagram, all
connected with
those.
me on Facebook, it'll allow them to look at them simultaneously. And somebody would say, "Oh, liked it." Somebody would put some comments on, and you're able to
Yeah.
develop those live interactions with family and friends. Correct?
Mhm.
Now, let's look at from a working perspective. Sometimes what happens is if you're not able to make it to the office, what you end up doing is you call up the office and you say, "Okay, I'm not able to make in today because I've had this problem, but can I work from home?" And because technology allows you to have access to what you are working with in the office, that data can then be made available to you at home for you to be able to work. So in some cases, what can happen is your teammates or your workmates who are actually working on the same bit can actually work on it and then email that to you. and you can pick that at home, which makes it easier and kind of reduces barriers, even though you're not in the office on that day.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, when we look at other such usage, look at schools and colleges, we look at hospital factories, the changes which technology has brought across, say, for example, in a car factories, you would see that a lot of heavy duty soldering, which used to happen in the manufacture of cars, is now done by
Mhm.
robots, right? Because
Yeah,
that
indeed.
is something which can be done much more efficiently, much more in a quicker fashion, and that has enabled that there is a combination of man, that means combination of people and advanced robots working hand in hand to create cars within a manufacturing facility.
Mhm.
So the existence of automated functions which can be performed by robots have actually made people's work easier when we look at heavy duty soldering or welding which used to happen within car manufacturing facilities. Okay.
Okay.
Now let's look at some pros and cons of technology. What are the advantages and what are some of the disadvantages? So this is the last slide that we want to look at. So some of the advantages are that obviously the use of technology has led to the creation of various kind of experiences. You could have different kind of experience while using a technology. You could, obviously disseminate information very quickly. You can make new
Mhm.
friends online, and it allows you to consume, distribute, and create information in a number of ways. You would have seen that in a lot of cases, if you're on Facebook, sometimes what a lot of people do is when they go to a new location or a new restaurant, what they do is they check in on their phone and they say, okay, I'm
Yeah.
checking into this place using Facebook, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah.
And they might post a photograph of that experience that they've had pretty much instantly using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is. And that allows you to kind of spread this good news or this bit of information very quickly. And that is one of the advantages. Technology has allowed you to obviously meet new people and make new friends. It has made easier, things wherein contacting people have become very, very easier. So when you look at networks like LinkedIn, which are professional networks. A lot of people go on to LinkedIn to make new friends, obviously transact business, develop
Mm.
relationships, things
Yeah.
like that. But that's a professional way of looking at meeting new people, even though you're based in a particular place or in a particular country. Now, technology has also made the interaction fast and efficient. You can speak on the phone, you can do a video call, you can, send a text message, you can do some iMessaging or use Messenger, but it allows
Mhm.
multiple ways for you to be able to connect and obviously have this interaction with other people. Would you say that the technology has made cost of communication cheaper,
Yeah, sure.
cost of traveling
It's
cheaper?
of course.
As the aircrafts have become more efficient, Airbus A380, if you look at, can carry up to 580 passengers. Somebody who is
Yeah,
looking
sure.
at flying from
They
London
almost double
to
their
New York,
capacity. Yeah, many things.
absolutely, absolutely. So with the improvements in technology happening in some of the other products and services, it is making, obviously the costs are becoming much more efficient.
Mhm.
And again, the last point, which is reinforced by maybe by technology itself, is maintain long distance friendships. So, because travel has become cheaper over the years, with airlines becoming more efficient, offering cheaper prices or travel plans, it has become easier for people to travel and obviously,
Yeah.
also travel long distances for holiday, vacation, businesses, whatever it is. But that is all because of change in technology. It's not just happening in IT or telecommunication, but in the airline technology, other places as well.
Uh-huh.
Now, let's look at some of the drawbacks of technology. Now, if the cell phone network is to go down, because we've become so dependent on our mobile phones, if for
Mhm.
some reason the network is to go down and we are without a phone, all of our contacts, all of our details are in the phone. But if your phone battery goes dead, for example, or the network goes down, we feel helpless because it is so easy to disrupt this technology, which means that
Mm.
at some stage, if it's to go down, we will lose contact with pretty much everything because we are not used to the fact of maintaining these
Yeah.
contacts on a manual basis that we did about 20 years back. I remember, in '87 when I came to Paris under the student exchange program, I remembered everybody had a telephone directory in the home. Can you see that? Do you ever refer to a telephone directory now?
If I have access to a telephone directory now.
How do you refer to it? I have not even seen a telephone directory in probably about last 10 years. So
Uh,
the drawback of this
yeah,
is that
indeed.
because
Actually, only some villages. Yeah, in Greece.
we
I
see it,
think I saw the last one like 5 years ago,
there
something
you
like
go.
that.
There you go. So you might have it, still have it in the hotels or things like that, maybe as a souvenir or as an item. But yeah, in
Yeah, but
general,
they're
you don't.
outdated.
Yeah. So in general, you don't get to see it. So essentially, what the negative side of this is that technology is making some of the things which we have taken for granted as a backup, assuming
Mm-hmm.
if we didn't have an address book or if my phone went off and if I had to look for a particular number, we have become so dependent on technology to a certain extent is a drawback. Because
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
if your phone, people nowadays check not their watch or the ring that they're wearing or the wallet they are carrying, they check if they're carrying their phone, is because
Mm-hmm.
most of the information resides on it, right?
Yeah, indeed.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I think the other aspect of other drawback or other aspect of the drawback that we get to see is that the quality of social interaction amongst human beings is generally on a decline because of the use of technology.
Mm-hmm.
So there were certain things that we were aware of is that I think 10, 15 years back when when we had somebody coming into our house or you going to meet someone, you would probably do a full interaction, give them full attention, look at them face to face in the eye. But now you get to see is that okay, the dad is talking to the children at home and they're on their phone and they're saying uh-huh, okay, and they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
So the interaction at the pace at which the decline is happening in the social interactions that we do, in terms of you might be present in the same room, you could see a family within the same living room or an area wherein they are all sitting together, but all of them are on different devices and they are still interacting, but they are not looking at or paying attention to each other, and that
Yeah.
has led to a bit of a decline in terms of social interactions because of technology. So we see more of positives in terms of positive impacts technology or the advancements in technology has made in the last 50 years on our lives as against to the drawbacks. I think in the drawbacks, we only look at one or two things. One is addiction, if we are overusing certain things. And the second is, in general, it is deteriorating the way we
Yeah.
interact with other people because we do see ourselves being dependent on technology, wherein we are more or less having a digital avatar. That means we have a life online and we have a life which is in person. So those are creating a bit of clashes and leading to kind of unhealthy interaction or behavior sometimes because of overuse of technology. Okay.
Okay.
So that brings us to the end of the first session. And in that first session, just a very brief recap, we wanted to look at three things. One, what have been the significant advancements of technology in the last 50 years?
Mm-hmm.
How these advancements in the last 50 years have changed the society in terms of we consuming information, producing information, distributing information, and what are the impacts of these changes, which that in terms of technology in particular is having on our personal and work lives.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
And we all covered
obviously,
that.
a copy of this presentation that I've shown is available online, which is here. And what I would suggest is, in addition to understanding the learning outcome one, what I'm going to do is send you a bit of a handout which will talk about these concepts. Handout means a Word document is what I'm going to send you in the email right now after the session.
Oh, okay.
And that will
Okay.
help you crystallize the concepts that we have studied, specifically things like data, information, communication, the 50 years, the impact of technology, and the pros and cons of technology in terms of how it is affecting us when we look at the usage of technology for communication.
Yeah, like bullet points.
Yeah, bullet points. Yeah, but they'll be about 4 or 5 pages. I'll send you. So these are four or
Mm-hmm.
five pages in terms of handout that you have to read, and they will also directly correlate to the tasks that you have to do at some point in time with regards to the
Mm-hmm.
assignment.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so I'm going to stop here for today's session, and what we'll do is obviously catch up on our next session, planned for
Friday.
uh, which is planned for
Mm-hmm.
Friday at 11 a.m.
Friday, 11
11 a.m.
a.m. Yeah.
In the morning. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so day after tomorrow. And if you have any questions on what we've discussed today, what we will do is we'll start off with a brief recap of this session.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of any questions or if you have not understood anything, then the idea would be to start off by addressing those queries, and then we'll get on to learning outcome two.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
that's
Yeah.
fine, Nicholas. I will end the session here now, and I will catch up with you on Friday. So in the meanwhile, just look out for the email which I'm going to send you shortly after this session. And any question,
Okay.
queries, just feel free to drop me an email.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for the session.
Okay, thanks for attending. Take
And
care. Bye for now.
okay. Bye. I'll see you Friday. Bye.